Merci d'accueillir le docteur Raphael Mechoulam, scientifique et père de la recherche sur le cannabis, et David Johnson, journaliste Madness UK.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Maddie Keynote, coming to you live from ground control in Paris. I'm David Johnson, country manager and journalist for Madness in English language. I'm delighted to be in discussion today with, I suppose, cannabis research royalty in the form of Dr. Mechoulam, who's joining us from Tel Aviv in Zoom. Dr. Mechoulam, welcome.
Hello. Bonjour.
Bonjour. We're really delighted to have you here today. It's a subject that is in the news frequently today. And to present you here as the father of cannabis research. I wanted to ask when you made the decision to start this research and what made you want to follow this path?
Well, I am a chemist. I'm a professor of chemistry, and I work on the chemistry and pharmacology of plant constituents, in animals, and I'm interested in all these compounds that are found there, and many of them have biological activities. So I was surprised many years ago when we started our work in the early 1960s that the chemistry of cannabis was not well known. This was quite contrary to what we knew about morphine from, again, a plant product, or cocaine. These compounds were well known, their pharmacology was well known. So I thought that it's a good idea to evaluate the chemistry and pharmacology and possibly clinical effects of this plant. So we started working together with some colleagues on these topics. Just it's a strange situation. I asked for a grant from the US. At that time, they were very open to grants from foreign countries. And they told me, well, cannabis is not of interest in the US. Nobody smokes marijuana. When you have something more relevant to the US, contact us. Well, a year or two later, the people at the National Health Institute in the US realized that marijuana is an important topic. So they came over and they supported my research for many years.
You make it sound like it was a quick and simple journey. I'm sure that's not the case.
No, it was not the case. Cannabis obviously is not open just to go and buy it in the market. I had to get it officially. And yes, I got it from the police. I was at the Weizmann Institute of Science at that time. The director of the institute phoned the police. They asked whether I am reliable. And the director didn't have the slightest idea whether I'm reliable, but he said, yes, of course. So he went to the police and got 5 kilos of hashish, Lebanese hashish, and we started working on Lebanese hashish. And later on, we got as much as we needed for many years.
I suppose the nature of the research is will always link cannabis and recreational use and cannabis is CBD and therapeutic use. I wonder if you can talk to us a little bit, explain the difference between CBD and THC and the different sort of effects on the human body.
Well, cannabis, hashish, marijuana, contain a huge number of compounds, more or less of the same type, closely related chemically. And we started separating these compounds. One compound, which had been identified many years previously, was cannabidiol, but the structure was unknown. And the active compound, which had been more or less identified, but not fully. So we separated and identified as pure compounds at the beginning, cannabidiol and THC, and elucidated their structures. And of course, they are completely different pharmacologically from each other. While cannabidiol does not cause the well-known marijuana effects, they are due mostly to the THC. And there is just one compound among all these that are present in cannabis which causes these effects, the well-known marijuana effects. Sometimes the compounds that are present in marijuana change a little bit the effect of THC. The THC is the only active compound, but the other compounds may change one way or another the effects of THC, of cannabidiol. So we call this effect the entourage effect, the effect of the other compounds which are not active by themselves, but act on THC. And if you wish, I can tell you a bit about the activities of CBD versus THC.
Absolutely. I think it'd be really interesting to look at especially on the CBD side, the therapeutic effects and uses.
Well, cannabidiol, or CBD, does not cause the well-known marijuana effects. It is not toxic, and it does not causes essentially no side effects. So as a drug, as a medicinal agent, it is an important compound. And indeed, we looked at many of the activities, and we looked at the activity in epilepsy. And this was done in collaboration with colleagues in South America. Essentially, all my work is in collaboration with colleagues, whether they're in Israel or they're in many other countries. They may be in Europe, in the US, in South America. So in this case, it was done in collaboration with colleagues, friends in Sao Paulo. And we looked first the activity of cannabidiol in mice and rats. And this is based on the history of cannabidiol. There are indications from the Middle Ages that cannabis affects epilepsy. So we looked from a modern point of view, of course, at the effect of cannabidiol in epilepsy, in models of epilepsy in mice and rats, and it was positive. So a clinical trial was initiated, and we were glad to see that it helped. We had patients, about 16 patients. Half of them got cannabidiol at the relatively high doses, about 200 milligrams, 300 milligrams per day, and the others didn't get anything. So they were compared. And those that got cannabidiol, and we saw that the cannabidiol affects their epilepsy, namely, they don't have epileptic attacks. Of the 8 patients who got cannabidiol, 4 had essentially no attacks compared to 1 or 2 attacks a day before that. 3 out of the 8 had a few attacks, but again, much less than previously, and only 1 was not affected. So we thought, oh, here we have a drug which is not toxic, causes no side effects, works on epilepsy, and many of the patients, young patient children with epilepsy need new drugs. So we thought that, maybe companies will start going ahead with CBD in epilepsy. It didn't happen for another 35 years. About 10, 12 years, 15 years ago, parents learned of our paper, heard from their friends maybe that cannabidiol helps with epilepsy, and they started giving it by themselves without clinical trials, without any clinical backing. And the results were very positive. So a British company did a major a clinical trial, while ours was on about 15, 16 patients. There was on several hundred patients. And yes, they saw exactly the same thing as we saw. Cannabidiol is a good drug for epilepsy. And today, cannabidiol has been approved in the US for several types of epilepsy. And in many countries, it is also approved for different types of epilepsy. In Israel, it is also approved for epileptic attacks.
You give a good reason why these clinical trials should be taking place. I get the feeling that it's not limited to epilepsy, however. I feel, is it still early days in the research? Are there enough clinical trials taking place to harness the power of the applications where this can go as a medicine?
Well, it has been shown by our group, by many other groups, that cannabidiol works on a large number of disease states. And many people use cannabis or cannabidiol for these disease states, but we don't have enough clinical trials. Clinical trials are usually done by companies, and very few companies have done that. I don't know the reason for that. Maybe the companies don't want to work with compounds that from materials that are illicit. But anyway, the number of clinical trials published so far is rather limited. I'm glad, however, that if one looks at what's going on, there are many clinical trials taking place at the moment. And I believe that this will end up with having cannabidiol or cannabidiol with THC for quite a few disease states.
It'd be interesting to think about what those applications would be in cancer and mental health. I think what's also at the same time is in the lack of the clinical trials, there seems to be a huge growth market of products that are CBD based, more lifestyle products, drinks, sweets, oils, in a more, I say, a lifestyle context. What are your thoughts on those products?
Well, as with every drug, we need the exact clinical data in order to treat a person with a disease, with any drug that's available on the market. A patient doesn't just take penicillin. He has to take a derivative of penicillin at certain doses. This is true for every single drug. So we need here clinical trials to establish exactly the doses needed. As there are no clinical trials and they have not been published, people use it successfully at times for quite a few disease states. In Israel, for example, there are 70,000 patients who get officially medical cannabis. It can be with CBD more than THC, it can be with THC more than CBD, and it can be also 50-50. And they take it for a variety of diseases, mostly for pain. There are certain pain states that most definitely are affected by medical cannabis. Other problems, gastrointestinal problems, quite a lot. Pain, stomach pain, or certain disease states like Crohn's disease and so on, they are very well affected by medical cannabis, mostly with high doses of cannabidiol or various types of inflammation. Now, one field that is problematic are the mental diseases. It has been shown that cannabidiol at very high doses affects schizophrenia, for example. There was a very important paper published by a German group showing that cannabidiol at high doses affects schizophrenia. But until we have more clinical trials, we cannot use it. Not THC. THC, on the contrary, may cause schizophrenic attack or mental changes of one way or another. So one should not take medical cannabis for schizophrenia, but maybe in 5-10 years' time, a cannabidiol or a derivative of cannabidiol will become a drug for schizophrenia, maybe also for other therapeutic indications like anxiety or certain types of anxiety, definitely for depression. But we need, again, I'm sorry to say that all the time, we need the good clinical trials before we start treating anxiety and depression with these drugs. It's a complicated situation.
And I would imagine even more fraught with complication because of the association with recreational use. Is that something that's hampered the research and slowed the process?
Well, the use of cannabis for medicine or recreational purposes is because of the effects. THC is well known to cause changes in mood, to cause changes in emotions, and people definitely take it recreationally for mood and emotions. Now, but that's different. That's completely different from the medical uses, which are, at the moment at least, they have nothing to do with mood and emotion. They have to do with specific clinical entities, and I believe that we shall have quite a lot of them. See, let me try to explain. There are THC in the plant binds to 2 receptors in our brain. One of them causes the changes in mood and emotions. The other one doesn't do that. The other one causes only therapeutic effects. CBD also causes only therapeutic effects. So we should have the data, and with this type of data, I'm sure that we shall have a lot of possible treatments in a huge number of diseases. A lot of them are neurological diseases.
So the scope is massive, really. There's almost an infinite potential applications for this. What's your dream? What's your vision for the future of medical use?
Well, we have cannabidiol that acts, as we talked on before, on various diseases. But you see, the plant doesn't make cannabidiol for us. It makes it for whatever the plant needs. So by making chemical changes of the plant material, we can have compounds which are much more active, or compounds that act a little bit differently. This is what has been going on with the pharmaceutical industry for many years. The scientists there pick up an active compound and they start changing it a little bit in order to make it more suitable for human use. And today you cannot buy penicillin at the drugstore. You buy a derivative of penicillin. You cannot buy many of the natural hormones like corticosterone. You buy a derivative. So chances are that as soon as the big companies decide that they want to go into this area, they will start making changes in the molecule of CBD, of cannabidiol, THC, and I have no doubt that we shall see a lot of new drugs that are very effective in so many disease states, not only in epilepsy, but in neurological diseases, in pain, in mental diseases, and so on.
And I think we have you to thank for your lifetime of research in this field what is going to change medicine for the future. On that note, do you have a message or a bit of advice that's seen you through your career that you can share with the future researchers and pioneers in fields?
Well, I would like to see the big companies, those that are able and have the background, that have the financial ability to invest in the cannabinoids and convert these compounds, the compound that are present in cannabis, to make them drugs, whether as they are at the moment, and in this case they have to do clinical trials, or variations of cannabidiol, which may be used for many additional disease states. I have no doubt that here we have plant materials which will be a fantastic use as clinical as against disease states. Let us not forget that THC mimics the activity of compounds that our body makes, very important compounds, and therefore we shall be seeing derivatives both of THC and of cannabidiol.
Dr. Mechoulam, thank you for your time. We've overrun by a couple of minutes. I feel like we could have carried on and that there's lots more to learn and explore together. Thank you for your time.
Well,
all the best.
It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.